New York Jets quarterback Aaron Rodgers looking an awful lot like Aaron Rodgers at OTAs. Some areas of concern or, let's say, improvement for head coach Robert Saleh. And we'll talk a little bit of OTAs. We'll talk some Salah. We'll talk some Rodgers. I'm Glenn Naughton with Dylan Terman, Chris Schubert, hopefully joining us shortly. How are we doing today, Dylan?
Doing well, Glenn. Glad to be back on. Hopefully, we'll get Chris in here and be the three of us. But yeah, more OTA talk, a little bit of fan worrying that I'm sure we can put the fire out on that one. And it's funny whenever you see the tweets, especially from Connor Hughes talking about Aaron Rodgers. I get so excited, and I don't care if it's June in shorts. Like, I'm going to get excited, and this is the perfect title of the podcast. I didn't even name it. You did. Is it okay for Jets fans to be positive? So I'm the guy. I'm Mr. Positivity. So glad to be on talking with you.
Yeah, I don't see how you could be. I mean, well, I get especially for the older Jets fans, I understand finding reasons to be negative. But I think for this particular team with the roster Joe Douglas has put together, and let's start with that because this has been a sort of an ongoing topic on the or a theme on the forums at Jet Nation, which, by the way, check out the forums at Jet Nation, most active Jets message board on the web, jetnation.com. Log in, register, become a member, speak up. Lots of good conversations on there, but some of them at the moment, you're always going to have a certain segment of the fan base, and like I said, I understand the negativity, or the propensity to be, or the predisposition to find something to complain about. But this roster is so good that people, when you look at some of the things Jets fans are worried about or complaining about, it really is reaching. Like, I've seen people, there are people who are, looking for reasons to rip Joe Douglas. Because listen, no matter who you are, no matter what team you work for, I'm sure there's someone out there who doesn't like Andy Reid in Kansas City. Like, no matter what you do, there's going to be somebody who doesn't like you. And when they don't like you, they're going to find a reason to criticize you no matter what you do. And I've seen people criticize Joe Douglas recently because, and listen, nobody liked this guy more than I did coming out. But I've seen people criticize Douglas because Izzy Abanikanda might not make this roster. It's like you're talking about a fifth round running back possibly not making the roster. Okay. Like, doesn't that happen? That's where the Jets are right now. The thing is, in years past, and by years past, I mean like 2 years ago, all the way through to 20 years ago, the Jets are always so bad that, like, you need every draft pick to make the roster and hit to like improve significantly. But that's not the case with this team now. And we talked about this leading up to the draft. I remember having the conversation about how few picks they had, before they started wheeling and dealing. But then as the draft got closer and we thought about it, it was like, well, how many do they need? Like, how many genuine needs? Like, this team, this isn't, a few years ago where you need 12 picks and you're praying that you hit on 8 of them because all 8 guys could start. Right. There might not be 8 roster spots on this team. Forget about starters. Open roster spots, I should say, that are up for grabs. So Douglas has built a team with so much talent and depth that we're reaching now. I saw a piece the other day, and look, I get it. People got to get clicks, this, that, and the other. But Brian Costello of the New York Post, forecasting like, oh, is this going to be a terrible thing for Hassan Reddick because he's not at OTAs? And there was, again, on the forums on Jet Nation, there was a thread the other day, should the Jets be worried about Reddick's holdout? It's an optional OTA. It's not a holdout.
Voluntary.
He just didn't show up. It was optional for players, voluntary workouts. He didn't show. So it feels like Jets fans that are so used to having a million things to legitimately complain about are really scraping the bottom of the barrel. And listen, that's not to say this team is without concerns. But what do you make of that, Dylan? I mean, you clearly more optimistic probably than myself and Chris. That's not to say I don't love this roster. That's not to say this might. I mean, this again. The caveat is health. I'm so sick of saying that, but you have to because it's a big thing. But if healthy, this might be the best Jets roster I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
And it's not particularly close, really. I mean, when I first started watching, we're talking I'm like 10, 11 years old. And it was Ken O'Brien, Al Toon, Wesley Walker, Freeman McNeil. Like that, yeah, that was a very talented team. Mark Gastineau, that was the end of Klecko, kind of. But those teams had a lot of talent. Of course, the Rex teams were very talented, but that was really on one side of the ball. But this team, you go up and down the roster, and the key thing to me is the premium positions: quarterback, the tackles, the receivers if Williams is healthy, the edge rushers. The depth is ridiculous. So, a lot of folks looking for things to be worried about. And here's our friend Chris. What is this, like months since we've done this? It feels like.
Well, Dylan and I did a show last week.
Yep.
Yeah, watch that.
The last time the three of us were together, I couldn't put a date on a calendar of when that was the case. The draft, probably. Yeah.
Draft.
Yeah, real life
100%.
Getting in the way. So,
seriously. All right, so lots to unpack with what you said there.
Yeah, Chris will figure out from your answer what I said, I believe.
Yeah, I feel like at this point in the offseason, if we're arguing about players specifically like Izzy Abanikanda, who right now I'm putting together a total roster rankings for like our summer, content, and Izzy Abanikanda is 49th. If we're arguing about the 49th overall player on our roster being not that great or potentially cut, I'm completely fine. Excuse me. I've used the analogy plenty of times before about the holes in the boat and people throwing water out of the boat. We only have about 2 holes on this roster. If you really look at it, really the safety position and depth at wide receiver. You can argue depth at linebacker is just a little unknown. It's not necessarily lacking, but it's unknown. But I think safety and wide receiver, and it's just depth, is the only 2 holes that I can find on this team right now. So to sit here in June and have fans saying Joe Douglas doesn't do this, that, and the third, or this roster's fine. I put out a tweet a couple weeks ago. Anybody under the age of 30, like myself, even like I know Chris is a couple years older than me, anybody in our age range, this is the best Jets roster we've seen in our entire life. Last year might have been like the most excited we were able to be about a Jets roster in a long time, but the talent level compared to this year and last year is just so different compared to the years past, even our old playoff teams. We talked about it last week a little bit, Chris and I. The difference would be coaching at that point. If you make it to the playoffs compared to the 2010 Jets, the talent on the field outweighs the talent on the field in 2010. The coaching talent does not, because we were loaded with talent in the 2010 team. So that's the only difference to me. So Jets fans nitpicking on the forums in June just goes to show that this team, again, on paper, when healthy, is a top 3, 5, 6, 8 roster in the entire league when you stack it up, and there's just no other way around it.
Don't age me too much there, Dylan. I have not turned 30 yet. I will by the end of the summer and by the time
you're only
the season
a couple months
starts.
older than me. Let's go.
But we've got some time before there's a 3 in front of my age. Look, I think there is a healthy conversation to be had of where this team has some flaws and where this team can improve, because let's be honest, guys, I don't think there's a single roster in all of football that is perfect. The Kansas City Chiefs just won back-to-back championships. That roster is not perfect. The Buffalo Bills, in an offseason that was a transformation for them, saw Stephon Diggs walk out the door when they traded him. Their roster is not perfect. The Miami Dolphins are not a perfect roster. I mean, teams don't have perfect rosters. This is not fantasy football. This is not Madden. This is not how this works. In a salary cap sport where you have a limited amount of resources available to you, you are going to have some positions that maybe could be better. And the New York Jets have that. Safety, corner depth, I think, after the big 3 is something that I have talked about quite a bit, potentially the interior of the offensive line. And those are healthy conversations to have. But I do not understand being doom and gloom about the state of this roster. This team is better than the team that they had in the summer of 2023. This roster is better. Does it mean anything? No, not until they play games. And we'll see if the coaching is better. We'll see if Aaron Rodgers is healthy. We'll see how this offense works. We'll see if Nathaniel Hackett makes a step in the right direction and stop being a dumpster fire as an offensive coordinator. Those are all legitimate questions that will get answered when we play games. But to sit here on June 5th and complain and criticize the roster and the state of this team, I think is foolish. I think you're setting yourself up for complete failure because you are never going to be happy. There's nothing that this team can do for you. I mean, what did you want them to do? 4 new starters on the offensive line for 2024. 4 guys who did not start week 1 of last year going to start on this team. You're going to have Aaron Rodgers. You added Mike Williams. You made an upgrade from Allen Lazard as your wide receiver too. You invested another draft pick in the offensive line. You went out and got another pass rusher in Hassan Reddick. You still have one of the best defenses in football. What more could you ask for? It's just not Madden. It's not fantasy football. It doesn't work that way.
That's a great point you made. And I say all the time, I think Madden, especially when it comes to the draft, I think Madden is what has really negatively skewed fans' understanding of what a good draft looks like in the NFL. Fantastic. You drafted 7 rookie Pro Bowlers in Madden this year, but that, like in real life, a couple of starters and a backup is a solid draft. Less than 50% of picks are hits in the NFL. But the other point you made, that's an excellent one, and I bring it up all the time. And I don't engage a lot with people who like other teams, so I don't know if every fan base does this. But Jets fans, a certain portion of Jets fans, treat every hole on the roster as if that's the end of the world. And that the point you made is one I often make. I'm like, there are no perfect rosters. Why as Jets fans are people looking at this roster and saying anything less than perfection and they suck? Anything less than perfection and Joe Douglas was asleep at the wheel. Oh my God, look at the safety room. Why is anyone giving Joe Douglas credit? Oh my God, Izzy Abanikanda might not make the roster. Why is everyone talking about Joe Douglas like he did a good thing this year? And it's a weird thing. Like I like it in the sense that you obviously want your team to be as good as you can at every spot, but it's just so unrealistic to expect them to be a perfect roster. And the Chiefs are the example I use. They've trotted out some pretty bad O-lines. They've not had a ton of depth at wide receiver. It worked out okay for them.
The one thing I would add too, though, and maybe you guys disagree with this, but I think it's healthy to say, hey, what's going on with Izzy Abanikanda? We make this draft selection. It doesn't really work out in year one. Now we take a swing with 2 running backs in the next year's draft. Where does he fit? Those are healthy conversations to have. But to take that and then leap to Joe Douglas is bad at his job is not a step on this ladder I'm willing to take. I think there are healthy conversations to be had of, how does the depth of this offensive line work? Do they have enough at safety? You can ask all of those questions and have all of those conversations without it being an indictment on Joe Douglas. Because, listen, there is nobody on this show that has been more critical of Joe Douglas than I. At every turn, I said, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if he can pull a rabbit out of his hat. I don't know if he can do everything that he needs to do in one offseason to rebuild this team. Now, does it work? That's a separate conversation that we'll have when the games get played during the season. But you cannot say that effort was not put in and boxes were checked. Tyron Smith checks a box. Simpson checks a box. Morgan Moses checks a box. Olufushanu checks a box. Mike Williams checks an important box. Malachi Corley checks an important box. They went down the list and got all of the things that we said were on the laundry list, on the honeydew list for Joe Douglas to acquire this offseason. Does it work? That's a separate conversation that we will have maybe by week 8, week 9 of the season. But now in the summertime, the conversation is, did they do what they needed to do to put this team in a position to compete? Overwhelmingly, the answer is yes.
Yeah, and it's like, do you give Joe Douglas credit for bringing in enough guys to push Izzy Abanikanda down to the 5th running back spot, or do you blame Joe Douglas for making a bad draft pick in the 5th round and he's just not somebody who is able to make his way onto the field? I don't know. Either way, like, Joe Douglas is responsible for most of everybody on the roster, so you're either blaming him or you're giving him credit. I'm just confused. You're kind of talking both out of both ends of your mouth.
I'll add one more. I'll add one more thing here, and I wonder if you guys have thought about it too. I still think there is a percentage of Jets fans, and I don't know what percentage I would put on it, but I do think is a loud percentage of the Jets fan base that is holding the Zach Wilson pick still against him, even though they've moved on. I still think here in the summer of 2024, entering this season, there are fans that entire saga, the pick, the not getting a backup quarterback, the starting him last year and not doing anything about it, the way they handled the offseason with getting Aaron Rodgers and not getting a backup then, all of it, the entire Zach Wilson era here in New York, I still think 10, 15, 20%, whatever number you want to put on it, I think there is a decent percentage of Jets fans that are still holding that grudge.
Well, I think that there are. I mean, there are still people as lazy of a take as it. I saw it just this week from somebody. I feel like every few weeks, maybe once a month, eventually it may dwindle. But I still see people swearing that they drafted him because of the throw at his pro day. Which we
got to move off that.
It's the worst take in Jets Twitter history. It's the
flat
worst take in
earther.
Jets Twitter history. It is the worst take in Jets
Mhm.
Twitter and football Twitter to say that the New York Jets made a selection on a quarterback because of one pro day throw. By the way, they had made the decision before that.
Yes.
Before they stepped
way
foot onto
before.
that pro day,
Yes.
the decision was already made. There's a numerous number of stories about this, about how Joe Douglas sat in his office and he evaluated every single quarterback and then evaluated Sam Darnold and ranked them all. And Zach Wilson, ranked above Sam Darnold, was the top quarterback that they had ranked before the pro day, before any of that nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I've talked a few times about, and it's something that I've harped on is the Charlie Casserly story before that draft, saying, he spoke to whatever it was, I think 18 teams who were didn't need a quarterback, and like 15 of them had Zach as as QB2. So it was some overwhelmingly teams viewed him as the second best quarterback in that draft.
Gather nice.
Again, pre-pro day throw.
Gather close to your listening device, however you're consuming this podcast. Gather nice and close. That entire quarterback class isn't very good.
No, that's another part of it.
Justin Fields on another team. Trey Lance on another team. Mac Jones on another team. Is Trevor Lawrence this franchise generational quarterback, top 5, top 7 that we all thought he was going to be? No, that quarterback class didn't pan out the way we thought.
Nope.
Yeah, and real quick in the chat, Andre here saying that the Hassan Reddick thing has him worried. I'm not too worried about it, but was it Connor Hughes? Somebody did tweet. I mean, I figured Reddick wanted a new deal in Philly. He's only got a year left. But it may have been Samini. I forget who. Dylan and I talked about this before the show. I take in so much Jets stuff, and I just forget who says what. And I really should jot it down so I can give proper credit. But it was Samini or Hughes. I think it was Samini, actually, who said that Reddick was looking for $30 million a year. And that's why the Eagles traded him and opted for Bryce Huff instead. And yes, the Jets on paper are top tier, but what do you do if you're just I mean, I can't imagine the Jets made a deal for him without finding out from the Eagles what he was looking for, or from his representatives what he was looking for. But that's that obviously with having Sauce and all the big guys coming up over the next year or two, if Reddick is looking for $30 million per, that's going to be tough to pull off. But not something I'm going to freak out about.
Yeah, I didn't think he'd get up. Sorry, I didn't think he'd get up to 30, but I thought maybe 25 million. I think Daniil Hunter just got a new deal in that range, so it's like that's kind of the market. I feel like right now, 30 million a year is kind of a lot because there's another player on this team whose name that we haven't mentioned yet, and that's Garrett Wilson, who could be looking at $30 million based on the wide receiver market. So it's how many 30 now? It's how many $30 million players can you have on your team? A year and a half, 2 years ago, the discussion was how many $20 million players can you have on your team. So it's just the cap is continually going up, of course, but that doesn't mean that it's easier to navigate when players are also demanding more. So,
and if Jermaine Johnson gets 12 sacks this year, is he a $30 million guy?
Right.
Sauce and Garrett are going to be looking for 30. Jermaine's going to want at least 20. He gets 12 sacks this year. He's going to be talking about 25, 30.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, go ahead, Chris. You were about to say something?
Two things on this. One, I thought we were all, and I'm not taking a shot at you guys. I think I know you guys understand this, but I thought we were better than this. Guys hold out. Guys don't show up.
Mm-hmm.
Guys miss time in OTAs. Guys miss the start of minicamp. Guys miss the start of training camp.
And remember, this is voluntary. We said at the top. That's not even,
Yeah,
sure.
Voluntary.
But he might not show up to the start of mandatory minicamp next week.
Yeah.
He might not. And you know what?
Even if he doesn't.
That's okay. That happens. If week 1 Hassan Reddick is not on the field for the New York Jets, then remember all the nice stuff we were just saying about Joe Douglas? We can have a conversation of, did he overestimate the situation? Did he trade for a guy that he knew wanted an extension and thought he could just maybe convince him otherwise and put his team in a bad spot because then he traded other pieces away? Okay, we can have that conversation when week 1 rolls around and when they're on Monday Night Football against the San Francisco 49ers, Hassan Reddick is not out there chasing down Brock Purdy. But until that occurs, until with my own 2 eyes, I don't see Hassan Reddick starting for the New York Jets, this is a non-story. It's nothing. Relax. Again, it's something to monitor, and I appreciate all the beat writers, talking it up. But I listened to what Robert Saleh said. He didn't seem like somebody that was overly concerned that he wasn't going to be there. Now, did he tell a little white lie? Yeah, because he said he didn't know what was going on. And listen, Coach, I appreciate it, but you know what's going on. You know that he wants a contract, and you can't answer that because you're going to open yourself up to a bunch of questions, and I appreciate that. Now, Garrett Wilson was mentioned, and I did a deep dive on this because guys are getting money. Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown. So I did a deep dive on this. I looked through the first 2 seasons of Garrett Wilson's career, and I compared it to the first 2 seasons of all the players that have gotten paid big-time contracts this offseason. Okay? And I'm here to tell you that the floor for this contract is what Amon-Ra St. Brown got. That's the floor, guys. He's not going to get Justin Jefferson money because I'm here to tell you, I have the numbers in front of me. Justin Jefferson, over his first 2 years, 33 games played, 296 targets, 196 receptions, 3,016 yards, 15.4 yards per reception, 17 touchdowns, 91.4 yards per game. Nobody that I looked at, none of the numbers I did a dive on are even in the same stratosphere of those two numbers. Okay. Yeah. What Justin Jefferson has done to get $35 million a year is warranted when you look at those numbers. But he's very similar to Jalen Waddle's numbers. And now there are some statistics where Garrett Wilson leads all these guys. There are other statistics where other guys are in front of him, and it's kind of a mixed bag. But when I look at comps, what Amon-Ra St. Brown did through his first 2 seasons is extremely similar to what Garrett Wilson has done. And so to me, that's the floor for this contract, because Garrett Wilson can walk into that room and say, I put up these numbers over my first 2 years with a terrible offensive line, with the worst quarterback play in the league, not even arguable, the worst quarterback play in the league. And I put up over 1,000 yards a season with this dumpster fire. And with Aaron Rodgers healthy, maybe 15 to 17 games of Aaron Rodgers, could you imagine what those numbers are going to look like going into a contract year?
That's
so
that
to me, that's the floor.
At the top, I think he's going to be looking at a 1,400-yard season. And he's going to say, I don't even want to talk about the first 2 years because those don't count because I didn't have a quarterback. With a quarterback, I'm going to be a 1,400-plus yard per year guy for the next, for the foreseeable future. But it's no matter how it breaks down, it's going to be a huge deal. But I'll be glad when he gets it because it will mean he earned it. And, the Jets will have a legit wide receiver one. And, what you guys mentioned earlier, the wide receiver depth. I think this is, we talked about it, Chris, last time we did a show, how Jason Brownlee, is he a guy who can basically take Allen Lazard's spot on the depth chart? That wouldn't shock me. I think, it's weird. Lazard is the guy, and this, again, another conversation on the forums on JetNation, where some people are saying they need a bigger guy like Lazard. And it's like, well, Lazard is big, but he doesn't play big. Whereas Brownlee is a few inches shorter and a little bit lighter. But he can high. Now, look, we haven't seen him do it at the pro level. But, the reason I was such a big Brownlee guy pre-draft, watching him with Southern Miss, like you see him make a lot of plays where he elevates, he gets over defenders, he fights for the football, he attacks the ball in the air, and he plays bigger than his size. So he's not on paper the big guy, but if you put him next to Lazard in their playing styles, to me, he plays bigger than Lazard does. So he's somebody that you could, who you could line up on the outside. And then, of course, Gibson in the slot apparently looked really good in OTAs. I know that's going to be Corley's role eventually, but I mean, really, I think it's his job week one as long as he does what they ask him. But Gibson is another guy. So I think there's a little more depth at receiver. You're not going to be expecting or asking as much of these guys because there are other options on the board, and now they've got a year under their belt. So I think I probably feel a little better about the receiver room than a lot of folks do.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think there's a chance that I think Allen Lazard will start the season on the depth chart above Jason Brownlee. I feel like they're just going to hand it to the veteran like they normally do. He didn't obviously earn it, but it'll be interesting to see how quickly that shifts. And if Brownlee gets more time with Rodgers throughout OTAs, training camp, whatever, if that does begin to creep him up the depth chart over Lazard, because if Lazard has a shaky first quarter, first 3-4 games, and Brownlee's doing, just as good in practice, that's when you pull the plug on Lazard. We've already heard he's only here for another year and a half comments from Salah. So
I don't think Salah meant to say that. That was.
I don't think so either, but the way it came off, it's like,
oh yeah, he was like, I'm ready for this guy to go. We have him for another year and a bit. So I think, I think the writing's on the wall for him.
Yeah, but like you said with Gibson, I mean, he's just going to be a good depth player because that will be Corley's role, you would think, obviously. It is weird. I feel like all the Hassan Reddick stuff, like, why isn't Corley's draft, like, why isn't he signed his contract yet? That's what makes me a little worried, more than anything. I'm not saying he's going to hold out, but if I had to compare him versus Reddick, I'd be more worried about the rookie not getting signed than the veteran holding out for voluntary camp, so.
Look, this group is going to be asked to do a lot, right? I mean, this group needs to be exceptional, and they're going to go as much as their quarterback play takes them there. But we are looking at a group that has a lot of question marks, It's a good group. It's a group that I think we like, but it's a group that has question marks. And so it's up to this coaching staff. It's up to Aaron Rodgers. It's up to them, the players themselves, to get the most out of the talent that we think that room has.
Yeah, and in focusing, thinking about the receivers and the depth. And look, I said at the top, I get that it's OTAs, and I get, it's no pads, and it's, there's only so much you can take from it. But even, the number one thing with Rodgers, of course, is the health. But how much, Chris, you weren't here at the top when we talked about this. How much of a relief is it for you, or how much do you take from the fact that it would appear from those who are in attendance that Aaron Rodgers looks fantastic right now?
No, I'm not sure if that's believable, because I saw a video on Twitter of Aaron Rodgers putting Band-Aids on his foot, and people thought that it was his Achilles.
Oh, yes, I did forget about that. Jets fans, I saw Jets fans are very worried about that.
So I don't. Are you
so in a tweet?
Are you sure that he looks good?
Very concerned.
Are you sure that he looks good?
I've not slept since that day.
Okay, I'm just making. Yeah, listen, I will use this platform now to talk about the ridiculousness that was. First of all, it was his foot. Second of all, not even the right leg, not even the leg of the Achilles that got torn. But everybody wants to talk about how gingerly he's looking. This is the second time I'm going to use this. Everybody gathering close, okay? Gathering close. Maybe, just maybe, when Aaron Rodgers was talking about how he was going to make a comeback in the middle of the season last year, and everyone was like, no, not possible, can't do it. Maybe when he was going on and on about that, he actually wasn't telling the truth, and he was just trying to keep his guys motivated. And what you're seeing now is a guy that is still recovering from an Achilles tear, just like everybody else recovers from an Achilles tear. And so, yeah, things might look a little slow at times. It might look like he's a little ginger because, yes, he's still working back from the injury. It's as if maybe he was just trying to keep his guys motivated, potentially, to make a miraculous run to the playoffs. And then maybe we could have had a conversation about him coming back. Maybe that's what was going on. I don't know. Just me.
Truly amazing. I had a friend send me the carton video of him breaking down, and I'm just like, guys, please just stop sending me.
Like, I thought you meant milk carton. You mean
no carton from
the gambling guy?
Yeah. So I was just like, as soon as I opened it, I'd already seen it. As soon as I opened it, I was like, guys, please don't send me this type of stuff right now.
Why have you seen? I haven't seen anything with that guy. I'm not gonna lie. I did watch his first show back after he got out of jail. I watched that. I haven't watched anything since. I mean, sometimes you're scrolling on your feed and you catch a few seconds of somebody by accident.
That's what happens to me with him. Yeah,
but that's not a person I like. Oh, let's see what this.
No,
I don't know when he became an insider. I mean, all of a sudden he has these stories that the 49ers are going to trade for Aaron Rodgers, and I don't know. It baffles me, fellas.
Hold on. What did you say? Hold on. Let me check. Jets depth chart 2024. I just want to check something real quick. No. Aaron Rodgers listed as a quarterback for the Jets, not for the 49ers. Yeah. It's wild.
Still there. Yeah. It's
crazy.
It's wild to me that and he's not, let's be honest, he's not the only one. There are a lot of people in the space,
bad at jobs? Yes, 100%.
Who never write about anything ever.
Yes.
And I don't want to just like throw shots at people for
getting bad fire away
right now, but like Greeny the other day, I don't know if you saw this. He was talking about, if Salah doesn't work out, I would hire Vrabel immediately. Okay, maybe we agree with the principle of replacing Salah with Vrabel if the time came, but to just immediately just be like, if everything fails, we got to hire Vrabel immediately. Like, first of all,
is there another person on the planet who takes as much pride in being so soft as Greeny does? It's like his. What do you call
that question again? Hold on. Ask me that question again.
What's the word I'm looking for?
Their gimmick.
It's his whole brand.
It's his gimmick.
His whole brand is like, I'm meek. Like,
because you know what? Because here's what I'll tell you. He has leaned into this idea of the woe is me, poor me New York sports fan. Because he's a Jets fan, he's a Knicks fan. I don't know what baseball team he roots for, but he is this poor me, woe is us. We can never have anything nice. And you know what? I'll say it. I grew up loving Greeny. Watch Mike and Mike.
Sure.
It was the inspiration
I'm embarrassed to say I used to love that show.
The inspiration of why I work in the field that I work in. Like, I loved listening to them do their stuff.
Mike and Mike was phenomenal.
He is a sorry excuse for a New York Jets fan. Sorry excuse.
Yeah. I've never seen somebody look for sympathy so badly on his own show, like looking around at like Kimberly Martin or Rex Ryan or whoever's on his show, Graziano, like looking for sympathy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the Jets are going to be bad. It's like, dude, we can't live like that.
Go get a new team.
Not on national television.
I don't know what to tell you. Get a new team.
Yeah,
Seriously.
seriously. This, I think,
Or a new sport, something less stressful.
I mean, I'd already soured on him over the years, but when he came on, I think we were in week 2 or 3 of the Robert Saleh era, and he said he missed Adam Gase. I was 100% out on him. I was like, I will never listen to a word this guy says again. And yeah, he's embarrassed. That's the word that comes to mind. I'm like, thank God for Rich Eisen. Thank God there is a likable, high-profile Jets
fan. There you
go.
Talk
about a Jets fan that I'll get behind. Give me
the
Rich
opposite
Eisen.
of Greeny.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Respect for Rich.
Eisen is somebody you can enjoy. But
I was gonna say Eisen had a guest on who was a Patriots fan. I'm forgetting. He was a celebrity, but he had them go through the Patriots roster or the schedule rather, and the guy came out with 7-10 or 8-9 as the Patriots record. And I was
6 wins too many.
I was like, you're like doubling what the win projection total is at 4.5. I think the books have it. So I just wanted to we'll get into it later, but I wanted to get you guys predictions on the whole division before we sign off for sure.
I think that should be a show. I think maybe that should be the show next week.
So I will tell you, I'm going through the rosters right now. I'm on the offensive side of the ball. I'm here to tell you the Patriots stink. They're bad. They're the worst rated group at every position. It's not even close.
Yeah. There's just not many good players on that team.
No.
Even if you like Drake May, that was another one. I don't think Greeny didn't say, not Greeny, the other one, Carton didn't say it, but someone, I think it was Plexico Burris. The Pats were on day 1 of rookie camp, and he's like, "Oh, the Patriots are internally they regret drafting Drake May." I'm like, after warm-ups, settle down, folks.
Man.
I know
the quarterback takes are bad.
I can't. They're just not good.
I don't miss that with Zach Wilson either. His first mini camp, every throw being under the microscope. I don't miss that. And
no.
Some teams just aren't built for that. Some markets are not built for the quarterback woes of training camp, and the Jets kind of fall in line with that one for sure.
Yeah. And speaking of the woes of training, I'm going to mention the woes of training camp because there's the last thing I want to touch on, the last topic. We've talked about Salah. We talk about Salah pretty regularly. There's a lot of things a lot of areas he has to improve. But where do you guys think? Give me 3 things he's got to do better. Because the thing that drives me crazy is stuff and I get it's a moot point in that everyone on the O-line got injured, but the fact that he didn't play his O-line at all in the preseason together, and then late in the year when things had unraveled, he goes on this, I can't remember if it was a post-game presser or I think it was an after-practice presser where he's talking about why the season's gone wrong. And he talks about the importance of continuity on the offensive line. And it's like, dude, you didn't give your group 1 rep together in training camp. And now you're sitting here saying it's so important that these guys build some chemistry. Now, it's delicate this year because you have some high-profile, injury-prone guys. So you have to balance that. But I think you've got to get these guys some work before the season starts. Excuse me. So I think getting the O-line some chemistry, holding some guys accountable. I don't want to see him giving guys attaboys as they jog off the field after a penalty. It's one thing to not scream at a guy. It's another thing to congratulate him. And I did see that from him last year. And basically the team's got to stop coming out so flat. They're consistently a flat team early on, and it's reflected in the numbers, the box scores, the lopsidedness of the scoring against their opponents. They're a flat football team. Even bad teams should come out fired up and have a few good series, and we just don't see that from them.
Yeah, I think my list kind of goes hand in hand with most of the things you said. In terms of accountability, it's not even just the players, because I'm sure behind closed doors, every coach holds their players more accountable, and he's just very, I don't want to say soft on them to the public, but he's very laxed when it comes to player scrutiny in the public. But he needs to hold his coaches.
About that. He said he will not drag a player publicly. He won't do it.
But I think he needs to hold his coaches more accountable when he's talking about them at the podium, just a little bit. I feel like you got to go to bat for your guys. That's obvious, just like your players. But at the same time, the Keith Carter looking in the mirror, reflecting on himself, like that's the first time we've ever heard anything like, all right, we've noticed our flaws and we're actually trying to correct them. Like I want to see that a little bit more in season. Time and rest management, I do think in the off-season training camp, mini camp, all of that is really important. And I think during the season, he needs to figure it out too. I feel like that's kind of going to be the reason that we are boom or bust is the health. So he really needs to focus on that. And then in-game decisions, obviously, I think that's going to be more to Rodgers' discretion, more so than like Rodgers or Salah, excuse me. So if Rodgers feels like it's all right, 4th and 4 at the 47, and we got to, we don't need it, but we were going to go anyway. And I think if Rodgers wants to do it, Salah's going to be like, all right, we'll go. Whereas before he'd be like, shit, let's just put Tom Morstead out there, pin him inside the 5 and let Ashton Davis and Quinn Williams get a safety against the Falcons or what have you, so just, I think it's more going to be up to Rodgers, but in-game decisions and ultimately like final 2 minutes of the game situations, that's where he's really got to pick it up a little bit. But ranked number 1 when it comes to looks, if that makes a difference to anybody.
Yeah,
I can't believe that list even came out.
It's the summertime.
I was going to say, I know it's slow, but come on, let's do better than.
It's seriously crazy, and I don't want to get on a tangent before Chris goes, but like, you made a list of female head coaches like that, and you'd get a completely different reaction. So I don't know. I just don't really vibe with it. But
well,
Chris,
this is, if there's any downside to the NFL becoming as big as it has become, is just that. Like, people want NFL news every day, and there's not news every day. So that's why you get these wild, crazy, like, we have to put out a story.
47 bold predictions for the 2024 season.
Exactly. Yeah. It's weird. It's we're kind of in that same boat. Like when I'm writing for JetNation, I'll have long stretches where I don't put much out because I'm like, I don't want to do position battles in June. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But that's what people are doing. And I understand it because you need content. You want stuff out there. But it's like there's not 365 days worth of material to write on a team, any team. But that's the problem. The NFL's become a monster. And when people, especially the people who do this full time and rely on it, they've got to have something. So there's a dude sitting at his computer thinking, best looking coach is fine. Oh, here we go. Like it's unfortunate, but the NFL's become that big that sometimes you get garbage content like that.
All right. So when it comes to Salah, I am of the belief that he is the most important person to the Jets' success in 2024, because I think we spent a lot of time last year just writing off bad in-game decisions that he made as a coach because of the bad quarterback play and the bad overall play of the offense. With decisions not going for it, aggressiveness, when to punt, when to take points, just the entire nature of being a coach and making those types of in-game calls. I think we overlooked a lot of those brutal mistakes, and they were brutal at times because of how bad the offense was. And so that is thing number 1 for me, is that he needs to be better with that in-game decision-making. Now, Dylan, you bring up a good point. Aaron Rodgers is probably going to have a hand in those decisions, and so maybe some of that gets taken off of his plate. But there are going to be times where I think he tries to overrule Rodgers because he's the coach, and I hope he makes the right decision. Secondly, Glenn, you talked about them being flat. I'll take that a step further. I hate them being flat, but what I hate is the inability to make in-game adjustments. How often did this team come out in the second half and play better than they did in the first half because they made the adjustments in the second half, but they just walked through the first half not doing anything different. They just allowed stuff to happen to them instead of them happening to the game. And so to me, it's okay to come out flat. You have to do a better job coaching to make those in-game adjustments and not wait until there's 12 minutes left in the third quarter for us to see those adjustments. You have to be quicker. You have to be able to adapt and make those changes on the fly. And that goes beyond Salah. That goes to the entire coaching staff. And that's where you start to worry about Carter. You start to worry about Hackett. You start to worry about those coaches on the offensive side of the ball to being able to do that. The third thing is accountability. And I don't think it's going to be the accountability that we all think it's going to be. Because again, he is not going to drag a player in the media. He's not going to do it. But here is where the accountability needs to come in. This team has to stop the procedural penalties before plays. Cannot be a thing. And that's on coaching. That is in meetings. That is out there on the field. You have to instill that into this team, that those things are going to be unacceptable. We can't take 5 false starts in a game. We cannot have illegal motion. illegal shift. We cannot have those things that stop us before the ball is even snapped. Those things are unacceptable. How many drives, guys? And I listen, I'm not going to really relitigate the Zach Wilson thing, but how many good Zach Wilson drives got completely derailed because Garrett Wilson's holding, or there's a hold on Elijah Vera Tucker, or there's an illegal motion before the play, or we're driving and now all of a sudden there's a false start that backs them up and now they're out of field goal range. How many times? The Chargers game in particular is the one that stands out to me, where they get down early and they're trying to make the comeback and just procedural penalty just knocks them out of range. They just cannot have that stuff happen. So for me, listen, Robert Saleh is the key to all this. I know Aaron Rodgers and his health is going to be important, but you have a head coach that I think we got a lot of questions that we don't know about. And to be honest with you, that scares me, because I still think there are going to be a couple of games during the year that are going to come down to Robert Saleh in-game decisions. And if he makes the wrong decisions, we're talking about a team that's not making the playoffs.
Yeah, no. I mean, we've talked about it, right? Like, which proven playoff head coach do you think this team plays against? And you go, oh, the Jets have the edge here at coach. Like, there are none.
No, I don't think there are. And you'll see. I know, I'm not sure if Rodgers has confirmed he's coming back on the McAfee show this season, but if there are in-game decisions that Saleh makes, I feel like Rodgers wouldn't be, the type to hold back on the McAfee show. And he'll be like, hey, we made some decisions. I wasn't necessarily with those decisions. I don't think Rodgers will hold his tongue in those, scenarios. So it's really going to be, put an onus on Robert Saleh, like you said, Chris, to make the right decision, especially if he is going to go against what Rodgers says.
If he does do that, though, and I'll say this because I think people have been, and again, like I said earlier, when someone decides they don't like someone, that's just the end of it, and they don't want context. They just want to criticize. Every time Aaron Rodgers appears on someone's Twitter account this offseason, there's that group of fans that are like, oh, I thought this was the guy that wanted to avoid distractions. And look, he went outdoors. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
But if you're going to go on McAfee and question the head coach publicly, that is where he would be rightfully criticized for, like, hey, man, keep it in the locker room. You said you wanted in the locker room. You said you wanted to get the bullshit out, but you're doing this on the air, criticizing your head coach. Now you're airing dirty laundry, or at least just questioning the head coach publicly is just a bad look. And when that happens, the presumption is normally this player isn't happy with this coaching staff. Chris, go ahead.
No, listen, I was the first person to criticize the RFK VP thing, right? Because that was a quintessential example of you don't want distractions and you're bringing distractions to the team. But that's in the past now. He was never seriously considering it. It was offered to him basically based on everything he said.
And he should have put that fire out day one.
And he should have, but he didn't, and that's fine. But guys, what has happened since then?
This is what I mean. I literally saw, because he was at UFC the other day, and because he was sitting a few seats from Donald Trump,
because he
snubbed
Trump on the handshake,
causing distractions. Yeah. Like, I don't think Aaron Rodgers sat down and made the seating chart. Like,
he didn't hop into the octagon. Now, if he hopped into the octagon and started fighting, that's worthy of having a conversation. But he's standing there and he snubs the former president of the United States on a handshake. Okay.
And then posts that he gave him a handshake. So it's like, but what are we actually arguing about?
That's not when he talks about.
But this is what I mean. This is people being ridiculous, looking for reasons, like claiming he's causing distractions when he's not.
Sure.
But if he does.
Him going on McAfee and just ripping Robert Saleh for 45 minutes.
I shouldn't have said it like that, yes.
No. But hold on, Dylan. Because if he goes on McAfee and he rips Saleh for 45 minutes, that's causing distractions. Him going to UFC and people looking at where he was sitting and making something out of him being there is not him causing a distraction.
No, that's him living his life.
Because listen, there's a lot to be critical of Aaron Rodgers for. A lot. And I think we've done a pretty good job on this show being critical when it is required. He's a quarterback of a football team who also has a life and has other interests. He wants to go on Joe Rogan. Go ahead, man. You're choosing to seek that out. Like, I'm here to tell you, he was on Joe Rogan 4 or 5 weeks ago or whatever it was. The episode came out. It didn't even register for me. I saw that he was out. I didn't listen to it. I didn't see any clips from it. I just moved on with my life. Just moved on. It's okay. The UFC thing. I saw that people were making a big deal of it. Just moved on. Didn't bother me. You can choose to not be bothered by stuff. That's allowed.
Yeah, and even, that's my thing. Like, even if you did watch it, avoiding distractions, he didn't say, be a hobbit and don't let the sun hit your skin this off season and, hide under your bed until OTAs. Like, he's going to go live his life. He's going to talk to people. He's a public figure. And that's the other thing. he does a handful of interviews, and people are like, "Oh my God, he's doing an interview every 10 minutes." I'm like, "Is he really?" Because I've seen like 5, and I didn't see. I saw clips of 5 because I don't need to hear every single word he says.
Yeah, I think he was asked about it too in the media, and he said something about just like the opportunities presenting themselves for him to go on and talk and say whatever. And I will say this about him though, is like everything he says is always very articulated, and he doesn't, usually misspeak when he's talking. So like if I made that sound like he was going to throw Robert Saleh under the bus, I didn't mean it that way. But he'll like throw those little encrypted
you just said he
things,
like he did in Green Bay, where he'd say,
or like he did with the draft when we didn't draft a wide receiver.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what he said, where it was clear where him and LaFleur weren't on the same page.
Right, and that's going to happen.
He said something about, I think we need to simplify the offense.
Yes.
And they told LaFleur, and LaFleur was like, it's as simple as we can make it. I don't know what he wants,
Right.
Like that's when it starts getting bad. But yeah. I get what you're saying. You saying that made me think of the people who were saying that he's currently a distraction, which he's not.
No.
Again, as Chris said, if you're seeking it out to claim he's a distraction, that's the only way. It's not that he's a distraction. It's that you're wanting to complain about it.
Our perception of it creates the distraction where it's like he's not driving drunk backwards down the Lincoln Tunnel. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's a distraction that's negative for the team.
Running for vice president of the United States would have been a distraction for the team.
Sure.
Going to UFC or being on McAfee or Joe Rogan more than likely doesn't cause a distraction unless people make it a distraction.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah, it's like I said to someone. I said if a player can't focus in the huddle because of something Aaron Rodgers said to Joe Rogan 6 months ago, like cut that guy. Like, oh, you forgot the play call. Yeah, I was thinking about that thing Aaron said on Rogan about, whatever, the boots, whatever. Those aren't distractions. It's called an interview. People do them. High profile people do them. It's not a big. He didn't even talk about. It's the funny part. I've never seen him do an interview until Rogan, where he's being interviewed by somebody who's like, "Dude, I don't know anything about football. Like, I'll come watch you play, but I don't know anything about football." And he doesn't. And Rogan says all the time, like, I know UFC, but I watch a football game. I don't know what's going on. So kind of, I don't know that I've ever seen him sit down and talk to someone who doesn't know the game he plays. But
and if I'm not mistaken, that Rogan podcast had about 3.5 minutes of football content in it. Everything else was not football related.
I think it was Rogan talking about how he doesn't know football.
Right. Like, so like for a Jets fan to sit there and watch however long it was, I don't even remember. I didn't watch it. I watched.
They're generally 3 and a bit hours. All the interviews
exactly. So if you're going to sit there for a 3-hour video, just as a sports fan, because it's our quarterback, and then start nitpicking the things that he says that aren't football related, you are thus creating the distraction. We know his takes at this point, so we just got to just talk about the football stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else to add before we wrap it up, boys?
No, I got nothing.
No, it's
all right.
Time.
Didn't want to.
They'll probably do something. Something will happen.
Two names to throw out real quick before we go, because I've seen them on several Twitter feeds, and it's very encouraging news. Before we wrap it up, Kenny Yeboah, Jeremy Ruckert, both supposedly looking really good. Ruckert standing out. Ruckert, listen, man, I got a million tweets out there saying, why is Jeremy Ruckert not getting more targets? Why are we not seeing more targets for Jeremy Ruckert? Let's get him involved. I think he can play. I think if Yeboah developed a little bit, that'd be nice. And any thoughts on these guys? Because, listen, they develop a tight end or two to add to this offense, and they're going to be that can be huge.
Yeah, I'm excited for this group. I think it's probably the second best tight end group in the division, just because of the high end play that Buffalo's probably going to get from Kincaid and Knox. Those are real game changers. I don't know if Tyler Conklin can reach that level, and there's just a lot of unknowns behind him. But yeah, I think it's a group that can certainly add to this pass catching unit for the Jets in 2024.
Yeah, and I know that Kenny Yeboah was kind of getting a lot of the early love. I think Robbie Sabo put out a tweet specifically saying Yeboah could be passing Ruckert on the depth chart just based on what he was seeing at practice. But yesterday they put out that second Aaron Rodgers no look on social.
Yeah,
that's the Jeremy Ruckert. So we're kind of getting them both into the swing of things here with Rodgers. So I'm excited. I mean, Jeremy Ruckert, is hopefully the pipeline tight end. But if we go into the season with those three, I mean, I'm not mad about it. I like all three. Kenny Yeboah can do a lot of good work. We saw that seam pass that they put out on Twitter as well. So I don't know. I hope he starts targeting the tight ends more, but I think Ruckert has a role outside of just tight end, which I think we need to actually see him do this year.
And if you remember, in one of those very distracting interviews Aaron Rodgers did, he gave a little shout out to Zach Kuntz a couple months ago, saying that they were building a little bit of chemistry late in the season when Rodgers was practicing with the offense. So he's another guy not to be forgotten about.
You can't say that though, Glenn. It's a distraction for the 2024 team. So
terrible. They're not going to be able to focus. Everyone's going to be so what's the word I'm looking for? Discombobulated over all the Aaron Rodgers offseason interviews. That'll wrap this one up. Thanks for joining us, Jets fans. Nice to have all three of us here in place. First time in a while. Hopefully get that again next week. And as I said, let's do next week. Let that be the AFC East team rankings, because that should be a good time. I think the Jets come out on top on a handful of those. Have a good one, Jets fans.